My name is Graham Ellison, and I turned 67 the morning the package arrived. Birthdays aren't something I make much noise about anymore. After my heart attack 5 years back, every year I've managed to see another sunrise feels less like a celebration and more like a quiet tally mark. Still, when the knock at the door came just after 7, I figured it was a neighbor dropping off a card, maybe a pie. Folks around Maple Harbor are like that. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a smiling neighbor or a package from my sister out west. It was a plain brown box. No return address, no markings except my name scrawled across the top in handwriting I hadn't seen in 3 long years. I froze there, one hand on the doorframe, staring at those letters. Trevor's handwriting. My son. The boy I raised under my own roof. The man I hadn't spoken to since he stormed out after our last bitter silence turned permanent. There was no mistaking the sharp tilt of the T, the impatient slash of the H, the way he wrote like he wanted to finish the page before anyone caught him. My chest tightened, not joy, not even relief, but something heavier, like a weight being set down where you least wanted it. I brought the package inside, set it on the kitchen table where the early October light sliced through the blinds in narrow golden bars. The house was quiet. Just the tick of the old wall clock above the stove and the hum of the refrigerator. For a long minute, I just looked at it, half expecting it to open itself. Finally, I tore the tape and folded back the flaps. Inside sat a velvet-lined box, the kind you'd expect to hold a piece of jewelry or a commemorative medal. But this was heavier. When I lifted the lid, a glass bottle caught the light and held it like fire. It was whiskey. Not the cheap kind you find at the corner store. This was a limited edition single malt, dark amber liquid sealed with wax. A deep green label edged in gold lettering. Even I could tell it cost more than I'd ever have spent on a bottle. A small white envelope was taped to the side. I slid it open with a thumb, and inside was a plain card. Just 2 words written in that same familiar hand. Happy birthday. No dad, no signature, no warmth. Just a message cold enough to frost the edges of the paper. I sat down at the table, the bottle between my hands. There was a time when whiskey was a comfort to me, not an escape but a ritual. A single glass after mowing the yard, or after a long day fixing things at the plant before I retired. My late wife Linda would sit with me on the porch swing, both of us sipping slow, letting the crickets fill the silence. That was before the doctor's stern words, before the attack that nearly stopped me for good. I hadn't touched a drop since, and Trevor knew it. He'd been there, silent and brooding by the hospital bed. When the cardiologist listed everything I had to leave behind if I wanted to see my 70s. So why send me this? Why send me something he knew I couldn't use? I turned the bottle in my hands, felt the ridges of the wax seal. The whiskey glowed in the slanted light, beautiful, useless. I thought of Henry Vale, my son's father-in-law. Henry had been good to me in the years since Trevor married Tessa. A solid man, the kind who never showed up empty-handed and never waited to be asked for help. 2 summers back, after a storm tore shingles from my roof, Henry was there by dawn, hammer in hand. If anyone deserved a fine bottle, it was him. Let it gather dust on my shelf. That felt wrong. Let Henry enjoy it, maybe share it with friends. Decision made, I slid the bottle to the far side of the table. Still, something about those 2 words on the card gnawed at me. Happy birthday. Nothing more. It didn't sound like a son reaching out after 3 years of silence. It sounded like a test. I shook off the thought. Not every action needs a hidden reason, I told myself. People surprise you. Sometimes a gift is just a gift. But the truth was, Trevor had never been one to spend money without a reason, and he had never done anything without expecting something back. That evening, the phone rang. The sound startled me. These days, the landline only buzzes for telemarketers or the occasional church announcement. I picked up. Dad. The word landed like a stone dropped in still water. Trevor's voice, older, harder, but unmistakable. Trevor, I said, steadying myself against the counter. Happy birthday, he said. Almost too late, like he'd forgotten the script. You got my gift. I did. Well, what'd you think? It's a nice bottle, I said carefully. Did you try it yet? His tone sharpened just slightly, like there was more riding on the answer than polite curiosity. No, I said. I passed it along to Henry Vale. Thought he'd get more use out of it than I would. Silence. Not static. Not a dropped call. Just a long, heavy pause. Then, a slow exhale. You gave it to Henry. That's right. Another pause. Huh. Then the line went dead. I stood in the kitchen, the receiver still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My gut twisted, not from the pot roast I'd eaten earlier, but from something deeper. The way he asked if I'd tried it, the weight behind the silence, the abrupt hang-up. This wasn't a gift. Not really. I replaced the phone and looked back at the table, now empty except for a coffee cup gone cold. Through the blinds, the October sky was fading to steel gray. For the first time in years, I wished Linda were here. She'd know what to make of it, what to say to calm the storm that had started building in my chest. Instead, the house answered me with nothing but the steady tick of the wall clock, marking each second louder than the last. And in that silence, one thought rooted itself deep. Trevor hadn't just sent me a bottle, he'd sent me a message. I woke before the sun, the way a body learns to do after doctors turn your life into a list. Coffee burbled in the machine, and I stood by the sink listening to the small sounds of a house that knows your footsteps. The bottle was gone, already buckled into the passenger seat of my truck yesterday afternoon, and left at Henry Vale's place with a half-awkward birthday explanation. That should have been the end of it. A sealed gift handed to a man who'd appreciate it. Close the book, put the kettle on, move along. The phone rang at 9:17, carving the quiet right down the center. The screen showed an unfamiliar number from town. I let it buzz once more so my hands would obey me, then answered. Mr. Ellison, it's Tessa. Her words came out thin, like she'd been running. I'm at St. Luke's, Dad. Dad, he collapsed this morning. My mouth filled with copper air. Collapsed how? They're saying his heart rhythm was off. He's awake for a second, then he isn't. They think it might be something he ate or, I don't know. She inhaled sharply. We had dinner at our place. He had a small pour from that bottle you brought over. He said it was too nice to open, but he wanted a taste. The counter edge pressed a groove into my palm. Every part of me wanted to say the right comforting sentence. Those padded words people wrap around fear like tissue paper. None of them fit. I'm on my way, I said. Text me the room number. St. Luke sits 2 turns past the courthouse. Red brick, square shoulders. The kind of building that makes you straighten up when you walk toward it. I parked in the far corner like I always do, and took the steps 2 at a time until my chest reminded me I wasn't 25. The ER waiting area was a bad dream of old magazines and plastic chairs. They'd moved Henry upstairs to a monitored floor by the time I found the right desk. Tessa met me in the hall. The nerves around her eyes had gone red and raw, but her voice held. He's stable. They're running labs. They asked what he'd had the past 24 hours. Tell them about the whiskey, I said. She nodded, guilt flickering through her like lightning behind a cloud. I did. They asked if it was new or opened earlier. I told them yesterday was the first time. We went in. Henry looked smaller against all that white, skin pale, hair flattened, the fighting parts of him tethered to a quiet, blinking heartbeat line. He tried to smile. It didn't make it all the way to his eyes. Don't you two start crying, he croaked. I'm not worth the water. The joke did what jokes do. It gave the room something to hold other than fear. I set my hand around his wrist, feeling the faint, steady press of blood. You scared the hell out of us, I said. Had to prove I could still get attention, he muttered. The monitor warned him with a polite little beep, and then settled down again. A nurse came in, took readings, wrote numbers on a chart. I asked the only useful question I had. Do you need anything from me? Information, she said. If the bottle is at your friend's house, we'd like to see it. If there's any left, bring a small sample in a clean container. Sometimes these things aren't what they look like. I said I'd check. After a few more minutes of Henry's stubborn breathing and Tessa's pacing, I told them I'd be back. In the hall, Tessa stopped me with a hand on my forearm. The kind of grip you give when you're steadying a person or yourself. You didn't do anything wrong, she said, eyes searching mine like the truth might be written there. I gave him the bottle, I said. That's enough to keep me humble for a while. Back home, the October light had thinned to a pale, undecided color. I stood in the kitchen and tried to replay yesterday in clean order. The box on the table, the heavy green label, the wax, the card. My gut replayed Trevor's pause. Did you try it yet? Have you tried it? I opened the fridge for no good reason. The way you do when you don't know what else to do with your hands. On the middle shelf, behind a jar of store-bought dill pickles and a carton of eggs, sat a small mason jar I'd forgotten. A shallow splash of amber at the bottom, less than a swallow. I closed my eyes, and the memory arrived, yesterday afternoon, before I'd driven the bottle to Henry's. I'd poured a finger's worth into the jar to see the color in plain glass and to smell it. Old habit, then screwed the lid tight and slid it out of sight. I hadn't put a drop to my mouth. Not a drop, but I'd kept the jar like a man keeps a thought. He shouldn't. I set it on the counter, staring at the way the light caught in the curve. The liquid looked innocent. How most dangerous things prefer to look. When I pulled out the kitchen trash to toss a coffee filter, something small and white rolled against the black liner. A plastic vial, the kind vitamins come in. No label, threaded cap. I fished it out with 2 fingers. A dusting of pale residue clung to its walls. Barely there, like the last breath of something that didn't want to be noticed. The lid was on tight. I didn't recognize it. I don't take vitamins. I don't buy loose supplements. And I'm the only person who uses this trash can. The house tilted. Not much, just enough for me to put a palm on the counter and let the tilt pass through. Somewhere beneath the rustle of leaves and the hum of a neighbor's mower, a thin line connected this to Trevor's careful voice and Henry's stubborn pulse. The line hummed. I have a friend, Dr. Noah Brandt. We put in time together when we were young and strong, and thought we could lift the whole world by ourselves. These days he runs a small veterinary lab on the edge of town, and knows his way around microscopes and toxins better than most people with white coats and big buildings. He's the kind of man who tells you the truth, then brings you coffee while you decide what to do with it. I called him. Noah, it's Graham. Tell me you're finally bringing me that old push mower to sharpen. I'll bring you something sharper, I said, and told him about the bottle, the hospital, the jar in my fridge, and the ghost of powder in a plastic vial I didn't recognize. He didn't waste words. You want me to run a screen on the liquid? Quiet, quiet, I said. Bring it after 5. I'll be around back. Don't carry it in loose. Lid on bagged. And Graham, yeah, don't taste it. I almost laughed, the way a man laughs taking a step back from a cliff he hadn't realized was at his heels. You know I won't. The hours between that call and 5 o'clock were longer than they had any right to be. I tried to busy my hands the way a man does when waiting, tightened a hinge on the back door, wiped down the counter that didn't need wiping, wrote 3 lines on a legal pad and then crossed them out. Package. Trevor bottle, card, call, Henry. The words looked like a list of bad weather moving across a map. At 4:36, Tessa texted a photo Henry propped up, a tired thumbs up. The caption read, holding steady. Docs think arrhythmia caused by possible ingestion. Running talks. I stared at those 2 words, possible ingestion, until they drained of meaning and then came back full. I sent back a prayer hands emoji because honest sentences felt too fragile to put on a screen. I wrapped the mason jar in 2 layers of brown paper and slid it into a zip bag, then put the bag in an old cigar tin I use for screws and fuses. The vial went into another bag, separate, sealed like it was a wild thing that might get out if I gave it air. When I stepped out to the truck, I locked the front door, then locked it again. Habit is another way to argue with fear. Noah's lab sits in a squat cinderblock building behind a row of cottonwoods. The sign out front says Brandt Veterinary Diagnostics, hand-painted, the kind of lettering that tells you the owner sharpened his own brush. He met me at the side door, lab coat over a faded ball cap, nitrile gloves already on. You look like trouble, he said. I brought some, I answered and held up the tins. He led me to a stainless bench, cleared a square with one sweep, and set down a tray. Let me do the handling, he said. The way firefighters tell you to step back from your own burning porch. He opened the tin with the jar like he was approaching a small animal, lifted it, tilted it in the light. Pretty, he said. Pretty's the first liar in the room. Can you tell anything by smell? I asked, keeping more distance than I needed. I can tell if it's whiskey, he said, and if it tries to knock me over. He cracked the lid a quarter turn, leaned in, took a careful breath. Whiskey, he said, and something I don't like. What does it smell like? Like a plant that would rather you mind your own business. He resealed the jar, labeled a small glass ampule, drew off a fraction of a milliliter with a pipette, and started a series of tests I didn't pretend to understand. Machines hummed. Lights blinked the way quiet machines do when they're thinking. He worked without narration, only pausing to scribble numbers in a notebook that had probably seen worse days than mine. This, he said, after a while, tapping the notebook with a capped pen, may not be fast. I'll run a quick panel tonight, then a more targeted set first thing. If it's what I think it is, or near it, we'll know enough to decide who else needs a look. Who else means police, I said. Who else means anyone who knows what to do with a fact, he corrected. I nodded. Henry had a sip last night. He crashed this morning. Noah's face thinned around the mouth. All the more reason to be right, not fast. The sun slid down behind the cottonwoods, while he sealed the ampules, logged a chain of custody that made my old supervisor's heart proud, and put the samples into a locked fridge with a label machine that whined like a child asked to share. He walked me to the door with the look men wearing when they've decided to carry a corner of your weight without asking. Go home, he said. Don't talk to anyone you don't have to. Lock your doors. I always do, I said, and meant it 3 different ways. On the drive back, Maple Harbor looked like itself. Gas station lights spilling over the pumps. Teenagers laughing too loud by the water tower. A dog trotting along with a shoe in its mouth like a trophy. The ordinary things were still doing their ordinary work, which almost felt impolite given the day I'd had. I wanted to stop and tell them they were doing good, to keep it up, because some of us were holding on to that like it was the last nail in the board. At home, I stood in the kitchen again, a man in the same place he started, only not the same. I set the trash back into the cabinet and closed it carefully, like it might wake. The plastic vial sat sealed in a bag on the counter where I could see it. I took a strip of painter's tape and wrote in block letters, "Found in kitchen trash 10/14, 3:22 p.m. Then I dated and signed it because paperwork is a way to talk to the future when you don't trust the future to listen. I called Tessa to check on Henry. She answered on the first ring. "He's sleeping," she whispered. "They're keeping him overnight." "Good," I said. "Noah has the sample. He'll run it tonight and tomorrow." "Do you think she started, then stopped?" I knew the word she didn't want to say, the shape of it in her breath. "I think we're going to be careful and slow and right," I said. "And we're going to let the facts speak louder than fear." A long pause stretched between us, but it wasn't empty. "Thank you," she said, for not losing your head." "I've only got the one," I said. "I need it." After we hung up, the house settled. The porch swing creaked once, and then the noise quit like it remembered its manners. I made oatmeal I didn't want and ate half of it, because men like me have learned that hunger and fear take turns, and you do better when you don't let either drive. Before bed, I checked the front door, then the back, then the side door that sticks, unless you lift while you turn the key. All locked. I pulled a bit of thread from Linda's old sewing kit and taped it low across the front threshold. A habit I picked up from a corporal who taught me there are quiet ways to learn whether a line has been crossed. The thread lay there, nothing more than a whisper against the wood. I told it good night like it was an old friend, then turned out the kitchen light and left the hall lamp on. Sleep came the way a nervous cat comes, slow, suspicious, ready to bolt. In the half-dark, the day replayed in a loop that nodded and loosened and nodded again. Trevor's voice, Henry's wan smile, the soft clink of glass on stainless in Noah's lab, the powder ghosting inside a plastic vial that had no business in my trash. Somewhere near morning, I dreamed I was back on the plant floor, listening for a bearing going bad by sound alone. The way you can tell a machine's truth if you stay quiet enough. The dream explained nothing. It only said listen. At 6:03 a.m., my phone buzzed with a single text. "Noah at bench. You were right to bring it. Call you after first pass." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I held mine with it. I made coffee, then didn't drink it. I stood at the window and watched the first weak light catch on the edge of the yard, and I told myself something I hadn't said out loud yet. Whatever Trevor sent me, whatever he meant it to do, I had put it out of my house. I had given it to a good man, and now I would follow the truth wherever it led, even if it walked me straight through my own front door. The phone rattled against the nightstand at 9:30. I'd been lying in the dark for nearly an hour, eyes open, counting the squeaks of the house as it cooled. When the screen lit up with Noah's name, I knew before I answered that his voice would change everything. "Graham," he said, low but steady. "You sitting down?" "I am. You were right to be careful." I ran the quick past 3 separate screens. "Your jar isn't just whiskey. It's cut with something I'd only expect to find in a plant toxicology reference book. White snake root extract." I let the words land. They meant little to most people, but I'd heard of the plant before, a weed that grows wild in shaded pastures, once notorious for killing cattle and the farmers who drank their milk. A slow, sneaky poison. "That explains Henry," I said. "It explains Henry's arrhythmia," Noah confirmed. "At the dose I measured, it's a cocktail built to mess with a heart that's already fragile. For a man like you, 67, cardiac history, it could have been a bullet in a bottle." The room closed in around me. I pulled the quilt tighter, even though I wasn't cold. So this wasn't an accident. It was prepared. Measured, he corrected. Somebody knew exactly what they were doing. The concentration's not random. They extracted, diluted, tested, probably more than once. This wasn't backyard foolishness. This was intent. I stared at the ceiling, where faint moonlight traced lines like cracks in porcelain. "I need you to hold on to the samples. Keep your notes safe. Chain of custody like you'd testify in court." Noah's voice softened. "You know what this means, Graham. It means calling someone who wears a badge. I'll get there. I need one more piece first." "What piece?" "The why." The next morning, I pulled the thread from the threshold and checked it with the care of a man inspecting a fuse. Still tight. No one had crossed, but the unease didn't lift. My house felt like a stage after rehearsal. Props set but no audience, waiting for something to happen. I made oatmeal, poured coffee, tried to chew. None of it stuck. The day outside was all golden leaves and tidy yards, but inside me, there was only one thought circling, Trevor's voice on the phone. "Did you try it yet?" By noon, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Dad, you gave me that bottle," I said. I kept my tone even, like I was just noting the weather. "That's right. You knew I don't drink anymore." A pause. "Maybe I thought you'd change your mind. Special occasion." Another pause. Longer. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Then he said, "You gave it to Henry." I closed my eyes. "He's in the hospital. They're running tests." "Tests?" His voice tightened. "What kind of tests?" "The kind that tell doctors what a man swallowed." There was a hiss of breath through the line, then silence. I pictured him standing in his kitchen, jaw working, eyes hard, words he wouldn't say building behind his teeth. "Dad, he said finally. Maybe it's better if we don't talk for a while. Then the line clicked dead. That afternoon, I drove to the hospital. Henry looked better, color seeping back into his cheeks, stubborn grin stitched in place. He waved me closer, with the motion of a man who refuses to surrender dignity. Doc says I'll live, he rasped. Guess the devil's not ready for me yet. Tessa smiled faintly at her father's bravado, but her eyes were rimmed with sleepless worry. When Henry dozed off, she pulled me into the hallway. There's something I should tell you, she whispered. Trevor's been experimenting. He calls it herbal medicine. He's got books, jars, powders, says he's making natural supplements. But some of the things I've seen, plants I can't even pronounce. She glanced over her shoulder as if the walls might be listening. I found a notebook once with dosages scribbled next to your name. I thought it was just him working through anger. I didn't think. Her voice broke. I put a hand on her shoulder. Steady. You've said enough. Keep that notebook safe if you can find it. It matters more than you know. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the legal pad before me. I wrote a new list. Trevor's gift, silence on the phone. Henry's collapse, white snake root extract. Tessa's notebook, 5 points. A hand of cards, enough to play. At 10 o'clock, I called Detective Marcus Shaw at the Maple Harbor PD. A man I'd known in passing for years. Steady, deliberate, no appetite for drama. I told him I had evidence of a deliberate poisoning attempt. He didn't laugh. He didn't doubt. He asked when we could meet. Tomorrow morning, I said. And I'll bring a friend's lab results with me. Before I hung up, he said, Mr. Ellison, don't confront your son again. If what you're saying is true, you're dealing with someone who's already crossed a line most men never even approach. Let us handle it. I set the phone down and listened to the tick of the clock. Shaw was right, but inside me I knew this wasn't just about evidence and police procedure. This was blood. My blood. A son who'd once ridden on my shoulders, now laying snares at my feet. I turned off the lamp and left the thread stretched tight across the threshold once more. Somewhere in the dark, I swore I could hear it humming like a warning wire. Detective Marcus Shaw had a way of speaking that made you want to slow down and match his pace. We met the next morning in his office at the station, a square room with cinderblock walls painted tan, a desk scarred from years of elbows and paperwork, and a single window that let in more dust than sunlight. He listened without interruption as I laid everything out. The bottle, Trevor's odd pauses, Henry's collapse, Noah's lab results, and Tessa's hushed confession about the notebook. When I slid the mason jar sample across his desk, sealed and labeled by Noah, Shaw turned it carefully as though it might explode. Chain of custody looks solid, he said, almost to himself. Brandt's lab is reputable. We can send this up the line for confirmation. He lifted his eyes. Mr. Ellison, you realize what you're saying? You believe your son intentionally tried to poison you. I didn't flinch. I don't believe it. I know it, but belief doesn't convict. Proof does. He tapped the jar lightly with a finger. This will help, but I need more. Circumstantial threads are strong when you braid them, but a jury wants the knot tied tight. I leaned back, hearing Linda's voice in my memory. You always keep receipts, Graham, so we give them something they can't untie. Shaw studied me. What are you thinking? Trevor won't confess in writing, but he talks. He can't help leaving empty space where the truth should be. Silence says more than words if you catch it right. I still have an old recorder from my plant days. I'll meet him. Ask the questions. Let the silence fill the tape. Shaw's jaw tightened. I should tell you not to do that. It's risky. If he suspects, he already suspects everything. I cut in. But if I sit here waiting, that bottle turns into just one more bad coincidence. You need more. Detective, let me get it for you. He rubbed a hand over his chin, then sighed. If you're set on it, keep it short. Keep it neutral. No accusations. Just let him talk. And for God's sake, don't drink anything he hands you. Back home, I dug through the drawer of relics every old man keeps: spare keys, dead batteries, pocket knives dulled by time, and found the little black recorder. I slipped in fresh batteries, checked the mic, tested playback. The hiss of empty tape filled the room, steady and reliable. By evening, I had arranged to meet Trevor at a diner on the edge of town. Neutral ground, public, harder for tempers to run wild under fluorescent lights and the smell of burnt coffee. I told him I wanted to clear the air, that a birthday should be a chance to start over. He agreed too quickly. The recorder sat in the breast pocket of my jacket, already rolling when I slid into the booth. Trevor arrived 5 minutes late, crisp shirt, hair slicked back, smile rehearsed. To anyone else, he looked like a man meeting his father for pie. To me, he looked like a stranger who'd learned my son's face. Dad, he said, sliding into the seat. Glad you called. I nodded. I've been thinking about that bottle. You spent good money. His eyes flickered. I wanted it to mean something. Did it? I asked. He looked at me over the rim of the menu. Smile stiff. Depends. Did you try it? I let the pause stretch. The recorder caught every second. I told you. I passed it along. Henry enjoyed some. His hand tightened around the laminated menu. Henry, he repeated. Slow. How is he? Hospitalized. I said, calm as stone. Silence. The longest yet. I could hear the clock over the counter tick 5 beats before he spoke. That's unfortunate. I leaned forward slightly. You sure that's what you wanted me to do? Give it away? Trevor's jaw moved once, twice, like he was chewing words too sharp to swallow. Then he forced a smile. Dad, you're reading into things again. It was just whiskey. That's all. The lie was too quick, too thin. The recorder didn't care. It captured the stumble, the silence, the strain under his tone. The waitress came by, set down 2 mugs of coffee. I wrapped my hands around mine for warmth, not trust. He didn't touch his. Funny thing, I said. Noah Brandt still runs his lab. He's been a good friend. The man can tell you what's inside a drop of water, let alone whiskey. Trevor's smile faltered. You didn't. He cut himself off, took a breath. You've always had a suspicious streak. Maybe that's what's kept me alive, I said softly. Another silence, a deep one. He finally pushed the menu aside. Maybe we shouldn't force this, Dad. Maybe it's better we keep our distance. He stood, dropped a 10 on the table, and walked out before the waitress even came back with pie. I didn't follow. I sat there watching the steam rise from his untouched mug, listening to the tape hiss quietly in my pocket, preserving every space where his words should have been. That night, I replayed the recording at my kitchen table. His voice, his pauses, the stumble when I mentioned Noah. It wasn't a confession, but it was a map, a trail of absences pointing to guilt. I copied it onto 2 cassettes, labeled and dated, one for Shaw and one for myself. I thought of Linda again. She'd hated silence in a room. Always filled it with humming or the radio. But tonight, the silence on that tape spoke loud enough to drown everything else out. I placed the cassette in a small fireproof box, closed the lid, and slid the key into my pocket. For the first time since the package arrived, I felt like I was no longer just waiting to be hit. I was holding something sharp of my own. The raid left me feeling like the air in Maple Harbor had changed. Though to anyone else, the town carried on the same. Kids chased each other past yards scattered with pumpkins. Neighbors raked leaves into neat piles. Outwardly, everything was still ordinary. But I knew better. When you tear the mask off a lie, the face underneath doesn't just sit still, it snarls. That night, I followed my ritual, checked every window latch, turned each deadbolt, tested the thread across the thresholds, all intact. I left the hall light on and sat at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold. Every sound carried pipes ticking, branches scratching glass, the refrigerator compressor kicking on like an intruder's breath. Sometime after midnight, I heard a faint tap against the back door. My heart stuttered. I stood in the dark, listening. Another tap like a fingernail against glass. I gripped the flashlight, moved slow. Through the kitchen window, the yard looked empty under the weak glow of the street lamp. I threw the bolt, eased the door open an inch. Nothing, just night air carrying the smell of damp leaves. But when I looked down, a folded sheet of paper lay at the threshold. No envelope, just creased once, heavy black ink bleeding through. I bent, picked it up, shut the door quick, and set the lock. The note read, "Stop letting them in, or I will." No signature, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was his, sharp and impatient as ever. I sealed it in a plastic bag, labeled it, and set it in the fireproof box with the others. My hand shook only a little. Fear was there, yes, but so was something steadier, a growing steel in my spine. The next morning I met Shaw, outside the station. He read the note with a face that gave nothing away, then slipped it into an evidence sleeve. "He's escalating," Shaw said. "Direct threat. That's good for the case, bad for you." "I've been bad for me for a long time," I said. He shot me a look. "This isn't a joke, Mr. Ellison. He's unstable. Pressure makes unstable men dangerous. Keep your doors locked. If you see him near your house, call us first, not last." "I will." Shaw nodded. "Henry's stable now. The DA's office is lining up charges. We're close." Close didn't feel like enough. Close meant Trevor still had time to act. That afternoon, Tessa called. Her voice carried a tremor I hadn't heard before. "He knows, Graham. He came home and found the door splintered. He's been pacing, yelling. Said someone betrayed him. You didn't admit anything, did you?" "No." But he looked at me like he already knew. She sucked in a breath. "I'm staying with Dad tonight. I don't feel safe." "You're doing the right thing," I told her. "Stay with Henry. Let Shaw know where you are. Don't go back alone." I hung up and sat staring at the wall. My own son, turning his house into a lab of poisons, now turning his gaze like a weapon on the woman he vowed to protect. I thought of Linda again, her quiet faith that Trevor would find his footing after years of drifting. She never lived to see what he became, a small mercy maybe. That evening, I found the thread across the back door snapped again. My pulse kicked, but when I checked, nothing inside was moved. Only one thing was different. On the kitchen table sat my coffee cup, the one I'd left in the sink that morning. It was empty, rinsed, and set neatly in place. The message was clear. He'd been inside. He could still get inside, and he wanted me to know it. I called Shaw immediately. He arrived within 15 minutes. Officer Pike with him. both sweeping the house with gloved hands and flashlights. They found no prints, no signs of forced entry. He has a key, Shaw muttered. Or he's learned how to work a lock without leaving marks. Either way, he's toying with you. Then change the locks again, I said flatly. We will, tonight. They stayed while a locksmith drilled out the cylinders and fitted new high-security models, the kind that laughed at picks. I watched the shavings fall to the porch floor, each curl of metal like a sliver of my old trust being stripped away. Before leaving, Shaw looked me square in the eye. You need to understand this isn't just intimidation anymore. It's psychological warfare. He wants you off balance. Don't give him that satisfaction. I've been steadier men have tried to knock me down, I said. He nodded once. Then keep steady. We're moving closer. Don't let him move you first. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again. The new locks sealed behind me. The threads stretched taut across thresholds. The fireproof box sat beside me, heavy with cassette, photos, notes, each one another brick in the case. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a man holding evidence the size of a hammer, waiting for the right nail. Trevor thought silence and threats would wear me thin. He didn't know they were forging me instead. The morning after the note, I woke with the uneasy sense that the world was holding its breath. Even the birds outside were quiet, as if they knew what the day would bring. The thread across my doors still held, the locks bit tight. Nothing moved in the night. For the first time in days, my house felt untouched. But peace never lingers long when a storm's on the horizon. By 9, the phone rang. Detective Shaw didn't waste words. We've got him. Where? Gas station off Route 14. He stopped to fill up, tried to pay with cash. One of our patrols spotted him, confirmed the warrant. He's in custody. The words settled heavy. Relief should have come. But what I felt instead was a hollow ache. My son, my blood cuffed at a gas station, led into the back of a cruiser under the same October sky I was staring at. Good, I said finally. Don't let him slip. He won't. You'll need to come down later for formal statements. And Graham, brace yourself. He's not the boy you remember. The station smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant when I walked in that afternoon. Through a small window in the hallway, I caught a glimpse of him. Trevor, seated in an interview room, wrists chained to the table, head bent low. His hair was messier than usual, shirt untucked, eyes sharp but sunken. He looked less like the polished man I saw at the diner, and more like a cornered animal. Shaw met me outside the room. He's been talking, not confessing. Not exactly, but he's circling around something he wants us to believe. What's he saying? That his experiments weren't meant to kill. That he was searching for clarity, some kind of herbal purification. He claims he sent the whiskey as a lesson, a way to scare you into respecting him. Shaw's jaw tightened. But the concentrations Brandt measured weren't accidents. They were doses. Calculated. This wasn't scare tactics. It was intent. I felt the truth of it settle in my bones. Trevor wasn't fumbling. He wasn't reckless. He had aimed deliberate as a man raising a rifle. Later, they let me sit behind the glass, while Shaw went back in to question him. The recorder on the table whirred quietly. The camera in the corner blinked red. You knew your father had a heart condition, Shaw said. You wrote it in your notes. Trevor shrugged, a ghost of a smile twisting his lips. Doctors exaggerate. My father's tougher than anyone gives him credit for. I wanted to prove that. You expected him to drink the whiskey. Another shrug. Maybe, maybe not. He always shares things, doesn't he? Always giving away what isn't his to give. I knew it would end up somewhere. My chest burned. He'd planned for it to reach Henry. Or anyone, so long as it wasn't wasted. You wrote out fatal ranges. Shaw pressed. You logged batches, concentrations. This wasn't health work. This was testing. Trevor leaned forward, eyes flashing. Every cure looks like poison at first. Penicillin, chemotherapy, even aspirin. You call me dangerous, but history will call me ahead of my time. Shaw stayed calm. History won't call you anything but guilty if a jury reads those notes. Trevor smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Juries listen to stories, and stories can be told many ways. I left before Shaw finished, unable to watch the way Trevor twisted words like wire. Outside, the autumn air hit my face, sharp and cold. I sat on the bench near the parking lot, staring at the courthouse across the street. I thought of Linda again, of how she'd fought for Trevor's better side long after I'd run out of words. She'd believed love was enough to anchor him. But sometimes love isn't an anchor. It's just another rope for someone to cut. That evening, Tessa called me. Her voice was steadier now, hardened by truth. They came by the house to collect more evidence. I don't have to go back there anymore. I'm staying with Dad. I'm sorry, Graham. I should have seen this sooner. You saw it when it mattered. I told her. That's more than most. There was a pause. Then she whispered, what if he blames me? What if he tries to? He won't touch you again, I said firmly. Not with Shaw watching, not with the law closing in. But inside, I knew the truth. Men like Trevor didn't stop blaming. They only shifted the weight until it crushed someone else. That night, I opened the fireproof box once more. Inside lay the cassette, the Polaroid, the note, and now, another bag with a copy of Trevor's scrawled formulas. I laid them out on the table like pieces of a puzzle. Each one alone was a warning. Together, they were a verdict. For the first time since that package arrived, I felt something more than fear or anger. I felt resolve, heavy and unbreakable. This wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about finishing what he started on my terms. Trevor wanted to play with silence, with poison, with shadows, but I still had my voice, my strength, my will, and before this storm ended, I intended to use them all. The courthouse in Maple Harbor isn't grand. It's a block of red brick with white columns added decades later, a place where traffic tickets and small-town disputes usually take center stage. But that morning, as I climbed the worn steps, it felt like the weight of every stone pressed down on me. This was where truth would finally have to speak louder than silence. Inside, the benches creaked under the shuffle of locals curious enough to slip into the gallery. I sat toward the back at first, fireproof box tucked under my arm like scripture. Detective Shaw met me with a nod. The judge will hear preliminary motions. He'll decide if there's enough to move this forward to trial. I didn't need convincing. I had lived enough nights with broken threads and poisoned gifts to know there was more than enough. Then they brought Trevor in. Shackled at the wrists, orange jumpsuit crisp, eyes darting like a fox in daylight. For a heartbeat, I saw the boy I once taught to ride a bike, wobbling, laughing, calling back for me not to let go. But then he smirked at the crowd, and the boy vanished, replaced by the man who had left poison on my table. The judge listened as Shaw laid out the evidence. Noah Brandt's toxicology, the confiscated vials and jars, the notebook pages with my initials, the Polaroid, the note. Each piece presented, bagged and tagged. The room grew heavy with every new exhibit. Trevor's attorney, a thin man with a habit of smoothing his tie, argued that it was all circumstantial. My client is a researcher, an enthusiast. He never intended harm. These notes are theory, not confession. The whiskey, unfortunate contamination perhaps, but proof of intent, none. I clenched my fists on the bench. Theory. Tell that to Henry's weak heart still beating under hospital monitors. Shaw remained calm. Contamination doesn't label itself with initials and doses. These aren't theories. They're instructions. The judge leaned back, silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. The state has provided sufficient cause. This matter will proceed to trial. A murmur rippled through the room. Trevor turned in his seat, eyes locking on me. No fear, no remorse, just that same crooked half-smile he'd worn at the diner, a smile that said he still believed the story wasn't finished. Later, Shaw pulled me aside in the hallway. We've got him bound for trial, but you should know he may try to manipulate the narrative. He's smart enough to play victim, to twist motives. He'll want to make you look unstable. Let him, I said. I've got the truth boxed up tighter than his lies. Still, that night, unease followed me home. The locks held, the threads lay taut, but I couldn't shake the look in his eyes, the way he stared straight through the glass like he was still inside my kitchen. I poured myself coffee and left it untouched, just to prove to myself I could. The following week, Tessa visited. She sat across my table, her shoulders straighter, her hands steadier. She'd been at her father's, caring for Henry, helping him regain his strength. Trevor keeps calling from the jail, she said. Leaves messages. Says he was misunderstood. Says he can fix it if I just stand by him. You don't answer? She shook her head. Not anymore. I'm done letting his words trap me. I studied her a long moment. You've got more strength than you know. She met my eyes. So do you. But Graham, when this goes to trial, you'll be on the stand. He'll hear you speak every detail. Are you ready for that? I've been ready since the day I saw my name in his notebook, I said. The pre-trial dragged on, motions and counter-motions piling like leaves in the gutter. But each step brought us closer to the point where the world would hear what Trevor had done. One night, sitting alone, I opened the fireproof box again. I spread out the evidence, the cassette, the Polaroid, the note, the copies of his ledger pages. Each artifact glowed under the lamp, fragments of a story no one could deny. And I realized something. Revenge wasn't going to be some loud act of fury, some wild swing of a fist. It was going to be this. The slow, steady tightening of a rope made from his own words, his own deeds, until even he couldn't wriggle free. For years I thought silence was the cruelest weapon Trevor wielded. But here now, I saw it differently. Silence would be my ally too. Every pause in his answers, every empty space where truth should have lived, captured on tape, sealed in notebooks, logged by officers. His silence would convict him. The night before the trial was set to begin, I walked the length of my house one last time. I touched each lock, each thread, each window latch. Then I stood at the kitchen table and whispered into the still air. You tried to end me with silence, Trevor. Tomorrow, silence ends you. The trial opened on a gray November morning, the kind where the sky presses low, and the cold seems to seep through every window. I took my seat behind the prosecution's table, fireproof box of evidence resting by my feet like an anchor. Trevor sat across the room in a suit too clean for the man wearing it, his hair combed back, his hands folded as though he'd spent his life in prayer. But his eyes betrayed him, sharp, restless, searching for weakness. The prosecutor began with the bottle itself. Jurors leaned forward as photos of the label flashed on the projector, followed by lab reports, graphs, and diagrams. Noah Brandt testified, his calm voice explaining the chemical fingerprints of white snakeroot extract found in the whiskey. Then came Shaw, steady as ever, laying out the notebooks, the Polaroid, the threat note, each piece placed carefully, like bricks in a wall Trevor himself had built. I was called next. Walking to that witness stand felt like walking into the eye of the storm. My oath echoed in my ears as I settled into the chair, gaze fixed not on Trevor but on the jurors. I told them everything. The package on my doorstep, the bottle on my table, the call with his strange question, "Did you try it yet?" I described Henry's collapse, Tessa's trembling confession, the broken threads, the Polaroid on my kitchen table, the note that chilled my bones. My voice never wavered. I had lived those nights, every one of them, and now they were not mine alone. They belonged to the court, to the jurors, to the truth. The defense tried to rattle me. "Mr. Ellison," the lawyer said, "is it possible your son was simply misunderstood, that his actions were not malicious but misguided curiosity?" I leaned forward, voice steady. Misguided curiosity doesn't calculate doses. Misguided curiosity doesn't write my name beside the word fatal. Misguided curiosity doesn't break into a man's house to remind him he's never safe. That's not curiosity. That's intent. The lawyer sputtered, shuffled his notes. The jury's eyes stayed locked on me. When I stepped down, I finally looked at Trevor. For the first time, his smirk was gone. His jaw was tight, his eyes flat as stone. Silence stretched between us, the same silence that had followed me since that birthday package. Only now it belonged to me. Days passed, evidence piling until even the defense looked tired of their own voice. Tessa testified too, courage steadying her words as she described the night she found her name in his ledger. She looked at him only once, and in her gaze there was no fear left. Only the quiet finality of someone who had chosen freedom over chains. The jury deliberated less than a day. When they returned, the room held its breath. On the charge of attempted murder, the foreman read, "We find the defendant Trevor Ellison guilty." The words rang like a hammer strike. Shaw exhaled beside me. Tessa gripped her father's hand. I sat very still, letting the sound settle in my bones. Trevor's head dropped, shoulders rigid. For once he had no smile, no clever words, no silence sharp enough to wound. The only sound left to him was the clank of chains as he was led away. Afterward, the courthouse emptied, the buzz of voices fading into cold air outside. I stood on the steps, coat pulled tight, watching the crowd scatter like leaves in the wind. Tessa approached, her face tired but lighter somehow, as though a weight had lifted from her chest. "It's over," she said. "Almost," I replied. "Verdict's one thing. Living past it is another." She nodded. "But we will." I looked at her, at the strength she carried now, and thought of Linda. She would have been proud of this young woman, proud of the quiet steel that had grown from so much pain. That night I sat at my kitchen table again, the fireproof box beside me. For months, it had been the vault of every fear, every piece of proof. Now, with Trevor convicted, it felt less like armor, and more like a relic. I opened it one last time, touched the cassette, the Polaroid, the notebook pages. They had all done their part. I carried the box to the fireplace, struck a match and fed the pieces one by one to the flames. Paper curled and blackened, tape hissed, plastic warped. The past burned away, smoke rising like a final exhale. When the last scrap crumbled to ash, I sat back, the house silent except for the crackle of fire. No broken threads, no poisoned gifts, no notes slipped under doors. Just quiet, honest quiet. For the first time since my birthday morning, I wasn't waiting for the next move. The game was finished. I whispered into the silence, voice steady. Justice is louder than revenge, and in that moment I finally felt free.